It's July 10th here in Seoul, and I'm Kim Dami. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour. Starting with President Yoon Suk-yeol's visit to the U.S. Indo-Pacific Command over in Hawaii. President Yoon stressed the first visit in 29 years by a South Korean leader is to reinforce the South Korea-U.S. alliance and joint defense deterrence at a risky time for the Korean Peninsula. He also encouraged the soldiers, calling their sacrifice a true power that drives international solidarity. The 2024 NATO summit has officially commenced in Washington, D.C. Global security challenges from the Ukraine crisis to North Korea-Russia military cooperation will top the agenda at the 75th edition. Torrential downpours swept the entire country in South Korea, especially Chungcheongbuk-do and Gyeongsang-do provinces. The government activated a Level 2 emergency operation of the disaster response headquarters as of early Wednesday. From polar bears to penguins, that describes the coverage of the U.S. Indo-Pacific Command, which includes the Korean Peninsula. President Yoon Suk-yeol became the first South Korean leader in 29 years to visit the command, where he met with servicemen and women to show his appreciation. Our Kim Do-yeon starts us off.
I put absolute trust in you. So says President Yoon Suk-yeol to U.S. soldiers of the U.S. Indo-Pacific Command, the U.S. Geographic Combatant Command responsible for the Korean Peninsula. This came as he visited the command on Tuesday and called it the pillar of the ROK-U.S. alliance in an encouraging speech to its soldiers.
엄중한 국제 정세와 한반도 안보 상황 속에 철통 같은 한미 동맹과 우리의 연합 방위 태세를 확고히 다지기 위한 것입니다.
He also called out North Korea as being reckless, saying that its recent military pact and illegal arms deal with Russia has raised more concerns in the international community. He also emphasized INDOPACOM's role in combating such issues, as it's the largest of 6 U.S. combined combatant commands, covering 52% of the Earth's surface, with the saying, from polar bears to penguins.
공고한 공약과 협력에 토대를 둔 강력한 능력이야말로 규범에 기반한 영내 질서를 굳건하게 수호하는 원동력입니다. 그리고 그 근간에 바로 인태사령부가 있습니다.
It's the first time for a South Korean president to visit the U.S. Indo-Pacific Command here in Honolulu since it changed its name from U.S. Pacific Command back in 2018. And if you count the U.S. Pacific Command as well, it's the first time in 29 years. In the meantime, before his speech to the soldiers, President Yoon Suk-yeol had the chance to meet with Commander Samuel Paparo. After a short greeting, Paparo briefed President Yoon on ongoing regional issues. According to the top office, after listening, Yoon responded with appreciation. In fact, President Yoon also awarded Commander Paparo with the Order of National Security Merit. While the commander only took on his current role last May, he led the United States Pacific Fleet for 3 years before this. This wrapped up Yoon's visit to Hawaii. Up next is the NATO summit in Washington, D.C., where once again, he's set to emphasize growing concerns over the strengthened cooperation between Russia and North Korea in front of NATO member countries and the Indo-Pacific 4 partners, Japan, Australia, and New Zealand. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News, Honolulu.
So wrapping up his Hawaii visit, next up for President Yoon is Washington, D.C., where the NATO summit has officially kicked off. As he takes part in the summit for the third consecutive year, there's a growing focus on South Korea's role in global security beyond the Korean Peninsula. Our Oh Soo-young tells us more.
Crossing over from Hawaii to D.C., South Korea is connecting security interests across the Indo-Pacific region and transatlantic countries as a practical contributor to global security. That's according to an expert speaking to Arirang News as President Yoon Suk-yeol heads to discussions with NATO countries in Washington, D.C. after wrapping up his visit to the U.S. Indo-Pacific Command. President Yoon's stopover in Hawaii demonstrates Seoul's firm alliance with Washington and a pivotal moment in its commitment to freedom, peace and stability in the Indo-Pacific and beyond. Seoul's assertive posture matters as European states look to work more closely with Indo-Pacific countries given their overlapping interests in countering coercive forces in international waters and the growing collaboration between Russia and North Korea. Seoul's presidential office says NATO and its 4 Indo-Pacific partners, including South Korea, Japan, Australia and New Zealand, will issue various statements criticizing the Moscow-Pyongyang axis.
The significance of South Korea's participation in NATO summit is that it is a reflection of how security issues in European theater and Indo-Pacific region are closely interlinked. Russia could continue sustain its war efforts in Ukraine because China is supporting Russia's economy. China is basically funding Russia's war efforts. So Europeans, they want to dissuade China from doing that. But now North Korea is providing ammunition to support Russia. So there is a closer link between security issues in the 2 theaters. And South Korea is in a critical position to manage the security efforts linking between the like-minded countries.
Since last year's NATO summit in Vilnius, South Korea and the 32-member bloc have been focusing on institutionalizing cooperation on battlefield information, military intelligence sharing and cybersecurity. Based on solidarity with like-minded countries, President Yoon's office said South Korea would seek to expand its realm of security cooperation to economic and technological partnerships.
South Korea's military industry has been advancing at the global level. So there is a opportunity that South Korea can provide support other countries' weapon system, their defense equipment capacity. So that's one thing. Defense industry leading, supporting other countries' defense capacity.
While in DC, Yoon will hold a marathon of bilateral summits with at least 10 countries, including Finland, Sweden, Norway, Germany and the UK, with conversations expected to cover defense industry cooperation, infrastructure, supply chains, nuclear energy and other significant security interests. Yoon and Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida are also expected to meet in their 2nd summit of this year, deepening their growing partnership against regional security threats as part of their trilateral cooperation with the United States. Oseong, Arirang News, Honolulu.
And this year's meeting is all the more important, especially for Ukraine, as it looks to revive support for its prolonged war with Russia. Lee Seung-ja has more.
With Russia's deadly airstrike on a children's hospital in Kyiv on Monday still fresh in their minds, U.S. President Joe Biden welcomed members of the largest military alliance in the world to the U.S. Capitol. The 3-day NATO summit that started on Tuesday is all the more significant as the military alliance celebrates its 75th anniversary this year. Kicking off the summit was a roundtable discussion on women, peace, and security. Later in the afternoon, NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg made a speech along with President Biden, who looked back on NATO's history and the current role of the military alliance. However, the prolonged war in Ukraine is expected to be the main agenda item at this year's summit as Ukraine looks to regain momentum for support. The U.S. has passed 5 different bills since the start of the Ukraine war, pledging $175 billion, including most recently in April, over $61 billion. NATO member countries have also pledged to maintain annual military support of around $43 billion. However, with former U.S. President Donald Trump's chances of returning to the Oval Office on the rise, it leaves some question marks over whether the U.S. contribution will continue after January 2025. At the same time, the summit itself may be the final test for President Biden's capability as not just a U.S. leader, but also a world leader who has been at the forefront of several global conflicts during his 4 years, as the November presidential election is mere months away. Meanwhile, President Yoon Suk-yeol is expected to hold 10 bilateral summits on the sidelines of the NATO summit, including a 4-way meeting with 3 other Indo-Pacific nations. Yoon will express concerns over deepening ties between North Korea and Russia, while looking to cooperate with NATO members and Indo-Pacific partners in the ongoing war in Ukraine. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Washington is busy welcoming back leaders of NATO as well as 4 Indo-Pacific partners. The 75th edition of the NATO summit has officially kicked off. We have our VOA correspondent Chris Keskeho standing by over in D.C. Welcome back, Chris.
Good to be with you.
Thanks for joining us. Tell us what the atmosphere is like at the moment over in D.C. I'm sure it's very busy.
Yeah, D.C. is bustling with activity. Lots of street closures and buses being rerouted due to the tight security at all of the event venues here in D.C. And it's causing massive headaches for the locals, with traffic being caused because heads of state are being transported from venue to venue. Now, D.C. is hosting this NATO convention because the founding treaty was signed here 75 years ago in 1949. U.S. President Joe Biden and First Lady Jill Biden welcomed NATO leaders at an event to commemorate the 75th anniversary of NATO's founding at the Mellon Auditorium near the White House. And the Mellon Auditorium is where the North Atlantic Treaty, which was the basis for the creation of NATO, was signed on April 4th, 1949. Now, the 50th anniversary of NATO was also hosted here by U.S. President Bill Clinton in 1999.
Right, and like I mentioned, it's not just the NATO members. IP4 members, they are South Korea, Japan, Australia, and New Zealand. They've been invited once again. Let's talk about that.
Yes, and they've been invited because of Russia and China's deepening ties and North Korea supplying Russia with weapons, which are the main common concerns for the so-called Indo-Pacific Four. The leaders of New Zealand, Japan, and South Korea are attending the summit for the 3rd year in a row, while Australia has sent its deputy prime minister. NATO is set to deepen relations with its four Indo-Pacific partners, which aren't part of the military alliance, but they are gaining prominence in the effort to counter Russia and China as they forge closer ties. And the two Koreas, of course, support opposing sides of the conflict raging in Ukraine. The U.S. and South Korea accused Pyongyang of supplying Russia with ammunition, while Russian President Vladimir Putin visited North Korea last month and signed a pact with leader Kim Jong-un that envisions mutual military assistance. South Korea and Japan, meanwhile, are sending military supplies and aid to Ukraine. The U.S. also says China is providing Russia with machine tools, microelectronics, and other technology, so-called dual-use technology that will allow it to make weapons to use against Ukraine. Now, South Korean President Yoon will bring to Washington a strong message regarding military cooperation between Russia and South Korea and discuss ways among the NATO alliance to enhance cooperation and its Indo-Pacific partners. His principal deputy national security advisor, Kim Tae-hyo, told reporters on Friday.
Right. So all the NATO members and IP4 members, they all share great security challenges around the globe. And on top of that, one of the main focuses at the meeting, of course, will have to be the Ukraine crisis, especially looking for ways to back the troubled country. The question is, how much aid is being considered this time?
Well, President Biden, in his remarks at the Mellon Auditorium, announced that NATO is providing Ukraine with additional strategic air defense systems, including additional Patriot batteries donated by the United States, Germany, and Romania. Also, Patriot components donated by the Netherlands and other partners to enable the operation of an additional Patriot battery, plus an additional SAMP-T system donated by Italy. Now, these 5 strategic air defense systems will help protect Ukrainian cities, civilians, and soldiers, and will be coordinating closely with the Ukrainian government so that they can utilize these systems rapidly. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, in a social media post on Tuesday, made it clear that air defense is still his country's key request as it tries to fend off the Russian aggression, and he has repeatedly asked for more Patriot systems, so it appears he's going to get his wish. These Patriot systems, he said, would help prevent Russian aircraft from flying close enough to drop glide bombs on civilians and critical infrastructure. For his part, NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg told VOA at a reporter roundtable that NATO plans to boost Ukraine's security through a 5-point plan, which includes financial commitments of 40 billion euros per year, a new NATO command based in Germany to coordinate forces, more direct weapons transfer, increased interoperability between Ukraine and NATO nations, and bilateral security agreements between NATO members and Ukraine. So we're going to have to see the specifics of that as the summit, takes place over the next couple of days.
Definitely, and then also stemming from Ukraine's much desperation to get aid from those countries. And the question is, though, will Ukraine be able to get what it has been wanting for such a long time, joining the NATO, the membership?
Yeah, it's unlikely that a formal invitation will come from the NATO 32-member alliance into this week. But a NATO senior official says that there are likely outcomes from the summit where we're going to see a path of bridged membership for Ukraine, where we'll see allies make long-term commitments to Ukraine. And he added that Ukraine should be on a path to being able to confidently mount counteroffensives in the not-too-distant future against Russia, but it's going to take some time to get there. But it should put them on the path to being able to begin to retake territory to actually push Russia's forces back.
Right, before I let you go, Chris, isn't this week a crucial week, especially for President Joe Biden? I mean, it is his first international event following his debate against Donald Trump last week.
Yeah, and, Biden's hoping to take advantage of being on the world stage as, there's so many international media members here. In addition to today's welcome to NATO leaders, Biden is giving a speech and holding a news conference on Thursday evening. This comes after Biden on Monday said he's staying in the presidential race amid a growing list of calls for him to step aside after that shaky debate performance last month against Donald Trump. He says all the data shows that the average Democrat out there voted, 14 million of them voted for me, and they still want me to be the nominee. He said this in a phone call on the MSNBC show Morning Joe on Monday. And the White House refuted questions that NATO allies are concerned that these cracks at the leadership level in the United States could put the 75-year-old NATO alliance on shaky ground as it meets this week. Now, Rice University political scientist Richard Stoll told VOA in an interview that there are likely concerns among the leaders of the NATO member allies about Biden's fitness and whether he can serve another term. But while they may not love him, they certainly prefer him to Donald Trump, who has, said things about NATO members paying their fair share and encouraging Russia to do whatever the hell they want, quote, if NATO members didn't pay their bills. But so NATO members are likely cautious about Biden and not saying anything publicly that could undermine him because they don't want to be seen as interfering in U.S. politics or the U.S. domestic election here.
Right. Concerned, but taking a careful approach. All right, Chris, thanks always for your report.
Yeah, good to be with you.
Heavy rainfall pounded the southern regions of South Korea overnight, so much that thousands of residents have had to evacuate from areas at risk of landslides. Paeunji reports.
More than 2,000 residents in the Gyeongsang-do and Jeollado provinces have been forced to evacuate as heavy rain poured down overnight. In Gunsan City in Jeollabuk-do province, heavy rain poured down at a rate of more than 130 millimeters per hour. This is the highest amount of rainfall recorded in the Gunsan area since weather observations began. Over in Secheon-gun County, located in Chungcheongnam-do province, over 110 millimeters per hour were recorded in the early hours of Wednesday morning. Houses and cars were flooded, and the Chungcheongnam-do Fire Service headquarters said it received more than 800 reports of damage related to flooding in a period of just 5 hours. In response, President Yoon Suk-yeol called for measures to prevent further damage. President Yoon, who's currently on a trip to Hawaii, issued an emergency order after being briefed on what was happening at home. He also ordered officials to evacuate residents in areas that are at risk of landslides and restrict access to areas prone to flooding. As of 2:30 a.m. on Wednesday, the South Korean government announced that the Central Disaster and Safety Countermeasures Headquarters alert level has been raised from level 1 to level 2. And the heavy rain crisis alert level has also been raised from caution to warning. The highest is level 3, and the heavy rain crisis alert levels are divided into 4 stages: attention, caution, warning, and severe. This comes as South Korea braces for another round of monsoon rain, set to hit most regions of the country until late Wednesday. 배은지, Arirang News.
At least 25 people were killed and dozens more injured in an Israeli airstrike on Tuesday, which hit a school complex housing displaced Palestinians in near Khan Yunis. According to Palestinian health authorities, the death toll is likely to rise as some 53 people injured are in critical condition. Gaza's health ministry called the attack a heinous massacre against displaced citizens. The latest airstrike also comes just days after the Israeli military attacked a school run by the UN's Agency for Palestinian Refugees in central Gaza, killing at least 16. The Israeli military claimed that the attacks were all aimed at Hamas militants hiding in the schools.
Good morning, I'm Kim Si-young, and this is The World Now. Russia's ambassador to the United Nations said on Tuesday at the UN Security Council that his country was not responsible for the missile attacks on the children's hospital in Ukraine's capital, Kyiv, that killed 41 people. Vasily Nebenzia said that evidence clearly shows the attack was carried out by Ukraine and that the Western members of the Security Council are trying to protect Kyiv. The Kremlin has also argued that the missile was one of Ukraine's. Ukraine's security service said that it had unequivocal evidence that a Russian missile was used in Monday's attack and published images of what it said were fragments of a Kh-101 cruise missile. The search resumed in Indonesia on Tuesday for 35 people still missing after landslides at an illegal gold mine on the island of Sulawesi, which killed at least 23. Authorities said that they deployed a helicopter and hundreds of rescuers after torrential rain on Sunday triggered landslides that engulfed miners and residents in Gorontalo province, over 2,000 kilometers east of country's capital, Jakarta. The military and police were also involved in Tuesday's rescue effort, among 400 personnel involved. Authorities said that 66 survivors have been pulled out of the debris, but thick mud has been hindering rescue efforts. Indonesia's disaster agency also warned of potential risks from further rain. One of Hollywood's most iconic companies, Paramount Global, has agreed to merge with independent film studio Skydance Media. Paramount's controlling shareholder, Shari Redstone, agreed to sell her stake to David Ellison's Skydance for $8 billion. Under the agreement, Skydance will invest back some $8 billion in merging their TV and movie production studio with Paramount, while additionally acquiring the Redstone family's National Amusements, which holds 77% of Paramount's voting shares, for $2.4 billion. While Paramount shares have fallen by more than 75% in the last 5 years, the studio created many hit films, such as the Godfather series, Breakfast at Tiffany's, Star Trek, and the Mission Impossible franchise. The European Space Agency's Ariane 6 rocket launched successfully on Tuesday on its maiden flight after a delay of 4 years. Coming a year after the retirement of the predecessor Ariane 5, Europe's newest unmanned rocket, weighing 540 tons and standing 56 meters tall, blasted off from the launch pad in Kourou, French Guiana. Ariane 6, which cost some $4.3 billion, began development in 2014 by the Ariane Group, a joint venture between Airbus and Safran, after the European Space Agency nations agreed on the need to respond to growing competition in the commercial launch market.
Good morning. Jeollabuk-do province had the roughest night with 150 millimeters an hour of rain pounding down. And rain clouds have moved towards the east to Gyeongsang-do provinces, dropping downpours this morning. Concerns are on the rise as more than 120 millimeters of showers are in the forecast throughout the day for Daegu and Gyeongsang-do province. Jeollado province should see downpours through the morning. Heavy rain alerts are in place for those areas with rain 30 to 50 millimeters an hour of rain pounding down. And making matters worse, a landslide alert has also been expanded to more regions. Landslides can happen suddenly and without warning, so please stay on high alert and be safe today for those in Jeollado and Gyeongsang-do provinces. Meanwhile, afternoon temperatures will be 4 to 5 degrees higher this afternoon. Seoul and Daegu both seeing a high of 31 degrees Celsius this afternoon. The capital area will also see rain returning in the afternoon. With that in mind, let's take a look at the international weather conditions.
We thank you for watching New Day at Arirang. We'll be back tomorrow at the same time, 9 a.m. Korea time.